Today's speaker is Stephen Patrick Guagliardo. He goes by Stephen Patrick mostly. He is a spiritualist, a Santa Muertero herbalist, and as a spiritualist, believing that we are called by God and the good spirits to a life of service to others in the spirit of faith, hope, and charity. Stephen shares his gift of mediumship with others in order that they might develop and progress on their own spiritual journey. Stephen has been a Santa Muertero for over 15 years. With his knowledge of herbalism, Stephen works closely with spirits of the dead to bring healing and balance to those in need. Stephen is also a local historian and is currently working on researching and documenting the history of the spiritualist movement in Rochester, New York. Welcome, Stephen.
I noticed. So I say this all the time. It's probably getting old, but if you can't hear me, you probably need to see a doctor. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about Cora L.V. Scott, which is her maiden name, and it's kind of a joke that I'm going to get into in a little bit. But she was just this early leader in the spiritualist movement and just had a really, really remarkable life. This talk is not going to be that long, so then everyone can get to the snacks and stuff. Cora L.V. Scott was born near Cuba, New York, April 12th, 1840, which, I mean, April 21st, because it's today. She would be 184 years old today. She was raised in the Presbyterian Church, but later on joined the Universalist Church, a progressive denomination that believed God's grace and love extended to all, and promoted the belief that salvation would be given to all people, and ultimately all souls would eventually join God in heaven. Crazy, terrible belief, right? In early 1851, she joined the Hopedale community, which was an intentional community based on progressive ideals of pacifism, temperance, and communal living. It promoted abolitionism and women's rights, and was sympathetic to the new movement then known as spiritualism. She found the community to be slightly too crowded and relocated to another community in Wisconsin, where she began to experience psychic phenomena. Cora began to experience trance mediumship and began to demonstrate automatic writing abilities. While in a trance state, she would lecture on topics of spiritual and social importance in front of crowds of people, and began to tour the surrounding communities giving lectures. And at the time she was like, I think I didn't do the math, but she was like 15 or something at that point. After her father passed away in 1853, she moved to Buffalo, New York. Still only a teenager, she became one of the most famous spiritualist mediums in the United States. At the time, a young woman speaking with eloquent authority in front of a large audience was virtually unheard of and was considered scandalous by some. Cora, with her brilliance, eloquence, and self-assurance, openly challenged the Victorian opinion that only men should speak publicly and that women needed to be meek and silent. Cora had the amazing gift of being able to teach very complicated spiritual lessons into a language that everyone could understand. Cora taught that spiritualism was a religion for all people, and that every individual had direct access to infinite intelligence and the spirit world, and that each and every person, through acts of kindness and spiritual cultivation, could achieve both inner peace and also work to achieve a greater world peace. Cora's approach to spiritualism was also unique in that she was one of the few early spiritualists to actively teach the concept of reincarnation, which now is almost like practically everyone I know believes in that, like that's affiliated with this. But back then it was not really that popular. Cora taught that our souls eternally progress and learn, but that this could take place either in the spirit world or through rebirth in the physical world. This teaching was largely not accepted by most American spiritualists until relatively recently. However, partially due to the influence of Cora's lectures and the teachings that were passed on by her to her students, many spiritualists in New York State in particular were quicker to embrace the concept of a spiritual rebirth than in other areas of the country. There were other reasons too, but she was like a very prominent one, at least among spiritualists. So regarding the thing I mentioned about her name, Cora was married 4 times in her life and kept each of her husband's names, making her full name Cora Laudentia Veronica Scott Hatch Daniels Tappan Richmond, which she used the full name most of the time, at least when in her publications. Most people simply referred to her as Cora Hatch, as this was her name when she became well known as a trance lecturer when she was married to her first husband, Benjamin Hatch, who himself was a mesmerist healer. In 1874, Cora spoke in London on a lecture tour. When she returned to the United States in 1875, she became the leader of a spiritualist society in Chicago. Chicago at the time was one of like the biggest major centers of the spiritualist movement. At the time, spiritualism was actually more urban than it is now, and so some of the major cities, Chicago, Detroit, Rochester, Washington, D.C., New York City, were like huge centers of spiritualism. It was in 1878, fourth husband, William Richmond, began to assist her transcribing her lectures for publication. As I mentioned, her lectures were in trance, when she was in a trance state. And so a lot of the lectures were actually not written down, or if they were written down, they were written down in like kind of like hurried notes by other people in the audience, because she didn't prepare anything. She just went up and let her spirit guide speak through her. And sometimes she would talk for hours, which this will not be that long. In 1893, she delivered a presentation on spiritualism at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. And that year, she was elected as the first vice president of the National Spiritualist Association. In 1896, Cora founded her own spiritualist church in Chicago, which she named the Church of the Soul. The congregation met at a few different locations, but for most of the time rented space in a lecture hall owned by Freemasons. She continued to serve as a leader, teacher, and lecturer up into her passing at age 82 on January 3rd, 1923. So she lived a very long time. In 1882, going back a little bit earlier, Cora published a book that was titled Weena's Canoe. The text was a collection of poems and short stories that were given to her through the mediumship of her spirit guide named Weena. The spirit was a spirit of a young Native American woman, and the content of the book was actually intended for children and teaches spiritualist concepts and principles in a very simple language through stories and poems that are mostly about nature. One section in particular is called Flowers from My Garden, and it is a simple piece on how to live a spiritual life according to the teachings of spiritualism. And it's interesting because this little text can almost be like a standalone piece of literature, like within this book that's like a collection of poems. And so I actually wanted to just read it because it's very, very short, and I think it is probably one of the best summaries of just kind of how to live a life according to the teachings of spiritualism, and it's barely even a page long. So, Flowers from My Garden by Cora L.V. Scott. Kind deeds are like blossoms blown by the summer wind. They bring sweet fragrance, and their fruitage is love. A kind word may soothe a saddened heart. A kind act heals it. Love is better than duty. Duty binds for a day or a year, but love binds forever. Love one another is the queen of all the flowers. With this our garden is full, for we have charity, mercy, kindness, all good thoughts and deeds loving one another. Charity is a starry flower, one of the children of love. Mercy is a fragrant blossom in the sister of charity. Kindness is also like these and is the child of love. Be kind to your brothers and sisters. Be kind to your mates. Love your parents. Kind words can never die. Blessed are the merciful. Love conquers all fear. Love is stronger than faith. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity covereth many sins. Charity never fails. Love is fulfilling of the law. These form a floral wreath whose golden and white links are love. And so I leave those teachings with you today, and have a wonderful day.
Hold on.